Okay, Danny, have you seen, it's like Future Forecaster on TikTok who does these little outfit videos?
I have not.
Okay, this is my current TikTok obsession. She
Okay.
went viral overnight and I just think she is so wonderful.
Okay.
So she goes, get ready with me. And every day, every day, every day she's like, let's get some water, a hairbrush, and don't forget about curl refresher. And then she like sprays it in her hair, and then then she brushes it out so it's less curly, but the curl
Okay.
refresher's there. That's not important. And then she always has a theme for the day for outfit. All that to say, this is not the important aspect. And and then she always does 8 crystal bracelets for different meanings. And then she
Okay.
also makes a care pouch of crystals, which she puts right here in her secret pocket. And she says all of their meanings are according to Aluna. And she was like, if you don't know what that is, check out my pinned video. And I was like, well, I gotta check out what that
Sure.
is. Like, I thought that was some like crystal company. I don't know. More things are coming up, but she has one crystal. It's a black obsidian to prevent misfortune.
Of course.
If you're a crystal person, that is great. Like, I'm not trying to downplay that, but
You're kind of shitting on crystal.
no,
people
I'm
right
not.
now.
I'm not trying to. She was like, my black obsidian to prevent misfortune, and then it broke, and I was like, no. And she was like, all of the evil energy is coming out. Again, if that's that's totally fine.
Sorry, before you continue, she's not being ironic. This is like
Not at all.
Okay, great.
And she clearly just has a wonderful heart and is like just a blast. Okay. But so then she was like, check out my pinned video. And so I was like, I'm gonna check out this pinned video. And she was like, Aluna is a religion that I created. And I was like, oh, I'm so in. And she was like, so let me tell you about it. And basically, I wish we could just like play the video on here, but we're not gonna do that.
We might be able to. Hold on, pause for 3 seconds.
I'm writing a book about elves, or as I call them, Alakai. This book gave me an excuse to create my own religion. My whole life I didn't know what to believe in, but I think I've got it now. The Alakai religion is called Aluna, and Aluna teaches that all earth gods are real. And that's because the energy of people's belief has made them real. You can pray to any god or spirit and have an equal chance of being answered. You can even make a new god, and that god is just as valid as any other god. And even if you worship other gods, you are still respecting Aluna. Aluna also agrees that there is magic in earthly things such as crystals, herbs, even animals. There is a witchcraft side to Aluna. And Aluna witchcraft is so much fun. You're free to make your own altars, shrines, and spells, however best suits your goals. Now I can, and I plan to, talk about the Aluna meanings of crystals and herbs, but in reality, what's important for Aluna is what they mean to you. If a regular rock you found on the street means cleansing and prosperity, then it shall be because your energy of belief makes it so. Aluna mainly worships the god Time, who created the universe. Because a universe like ours cannot exist without time to tick, even though our measurement of time is completely a social construct. Aluna says that before Time created this universe, there was a multiverse ruled by a cruel god, and that Time escaped to create a place where souls could choose their paths in life. That suffering would not have to be the norm. That happiness and prosperity would be possible. And that by asking your spirit guides for help, you too could find your own place of happiness, even in the most difficult of times. The only worship Aluna asks for is to say good morning and good night to a shrine to the stars. Because to become a star, you are the ultimate caregiver to others, and you are a part of the Universal Council, and you are closest to the realm of souls, the original universe. So simply say good morning and good night to a shrine to your stars, and even that part is optional, you do not have to. You can say prayers to the stars, whether it's at your bed or at your shrine. And even if the stars do not answer, it is most likely that a guardian spirit will. In case you're interested, I have a shrine to the stars, and I would be happy to share it with you. It's also a shrine to my family lineage, which helps guardian spirits find me. And maybe this sounds like complete gibberish to you, and that's fine. But I personally need a religion to believe in, and this is what I found. Let's chat about it. I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
a video might have played right there.
That would have been amazing.
That'd be cool.
If it didn't, I'm going to tell you basically what it says. So she goes, so basically she goes through all of these like different aspects, and then she says like, so she'll be like, in Aluna, all God, like the God of all the Bible, or I'm sorry, the God of all religions is the same God. And then she's like, but honestly, if you don't want to believe in a God, don't worry about that part. And then she's like, also, it's just important that you pray to a shrine, an Aluna shrine, unless you're not into that. Like, so basically, like, the whole point is that she goes through all of these different aspects of this religion that, like, she created. And every step of the way, she would, like, say something, and then she would be like, but honestly, like, no sweat. Like, that's optional.
It's, like, low barrier to entry.
And just everything is optional.
Yeah.
And I was just really struck by that because, I mean, it was just fascinating. Like, she really thought about every aspect of this religion, which I was like, good for you, dude. But also, like, the idea that everything was optional, there was this very, like, there's a very low stakes entry. And I think I know sometimes that people see deconstructors as, like, just fighting for everything to be optional. And so I guess what I'm wondering or processing, this is the question that I want to hear your perspective on. What do you think Emily, her name's Emily, future forecaster, is missing out on by having a completely optional religion?
Yeah. That's really interesting. I also, before I get into that, I would have never thought, and maybe this is naive, or an oversimplification on your side, maybe, but like, I don't know that I would have thought that that's what people think about deconstruction, is like they're trying to make more things optional. I wouldn't have made that connection. But I think maybe the more I sit on it, like it sounds maybe like, I mean, not optional,
everyone says like you're picking and choosing.
Yeah, so, you're trying to like create your own thing, I guess. But
DIY it.
DIY it.
So optional
but so what do I think? Like, what was the question?
What do you think that Emily, future forecaster, might be missing out on? And Emily Zoe, let's be real. I don't need to be real. I need to be thinking about optionalness.
TikTok trends don't work on podcasts.
But you need to make that into a little clip.
Especially once they're like 3 months old.
That is whatever 3 months old trends are is currently what I'm like. This is the trend.
Okay.
Like what would someone
on?
Miss out on by having a faith that is completely every aspect is optional?
That's such an interesting question.
Took your breath away.
I don't know. I think that's a really good question. I think I'd rather say, what are you missing out on by making Jesus optional? Like, all the other stuff I think is extra confetti, right? So it's like, I think Jesus is not optional. But I also think Jesus manifests himself in ways that can be found in like Buddhism and Hinduism and all these. So I think Jesus is important and essential. Now, when I think like, so it's like, are you making like going to church optional? Like, great, don't go to church. Like, be in Christian community. Like, don't go to the Sunday meeting.
Right.
Like, I don't think that's like reading your Bible, like optional, not optional. Like, I think there's benefit that comes out of it. Praying to a shrine, like you said, like, I mean, people pray to a rosary. That's a shrine. Like, people create their icons, is what Christians have used to create a word that's a different word from idol, but the exact same thing.
That was very harsh.
I'm not a big icon guy, but
you can not be an icon guy and not say they're idols.
Yeah, I think they might be idols.
I think some of them might be. I think they have the potential to be. Sorry.
So
I think into an idol fight.
So I think there's a lot of optional things, right? So it's like from when I hear her thing, what she's really trying to do is help people consider the idea. And I've never watched a video of hers, so I'm going to go watch now. But I'm interested, like, is she trying to help people understand they're more eternal beings, that they're more spiritual beings, like, and that all this other stuff can get in the way of distracting that? So she's like, hey, if you want to pray to this thing, and that's going to help you get there, do it. If not, here's another mechanism. So I think there's different routes to the same thing. I think when we look at, like, when I look at the lens of my faith in Jesus, like, I have faith in Jesus, right? So it's like I don't have faith in Cthulhu. I don't have faith in a flying spaghetti monster.
Yeah.
So it's like certain things aren't negotiables for me.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
For you.
For me.
Like, but you said Jesus can be like found in Buddhism or Hinduism or whatever. So it's like, to me, that's just like a fancy way of like saying that it's optional.
I think maybe. I would say like if Jesus can be the non-negotiable, right? And that Jesus can be found up in many other ways. Like I think you're a reformed person, right? So if Jesus wants you, he's going to get you, right? I'm going to get you.
Oh, yeah.
And so like I have
speaking my language.
I have a pretty deep trust in the sovereignty of God, that God's, because I'm like, I don't know. I've never found myself in the camp of universalists, but like, I'm also like, I think God created humanity and was like, I want to be in relationship with everyone. Right. And so like, why would God throw half or more of his population out? So I think God's going to get what God wants. If God's desire is to be in eternity with God's own creation,
then
right?
God has to overstep our will to if he wants to get what he wants.
Oh, I don't believe that. So, but I was going to say, I think that means God has different mechanisms to get in there. So, like, if God's relationship with us or Jesus isn't the optional portion of that, like, I view that as like God is going to give us multiple opportunities, whether it's in life, post-mortem, whatever. Okay. You view it as God, the only mechanism for me to have that is by God to force me to have it, because it's not compelling in any other way other than God to force me to have it.
No, that's not exactly what I'm saying. I think it's so compelling that one would argue it's barely your will.
My wife was so compelling that I saw the choice to choose her.
That's fair. That's fair.
Love you, Annie. I can't tell you how much she hates being mentioned on this podcast. I have to do a better job not bringing her up. She gets embarrassed.
Sometimes I bring her up. Sometimes I'm like, do you think God made your wife for you?
Yeah, she doesn't care about that, but she gets mad when I bring her.
She would never get mad at me.
She loves you too much.
It's fair.
She just tolerates me. But I think that's maybe my best analogy I've come up with. That I do think that like something can be really compelling, but not like just because something's compelling doesn't mean that it's disingenuous, right?
Yeah. I don't think something being so compelling that you can't say no to it means it's disingenuous.
Right.
I think that's honestly a side conversation, but now I forgot what the main conversation was. I don't know. I'm sorry I said that was a side conversation because now I'm stuck.
I know, this is wild because this is the episode we've drank the least before, and so so I think it's in terms of the idea of like Jesus being found in everything, right? Like God wanting us and what is optional, what's not optional. Yeah. So like when I go to that. Like, I think, like, I'm a Christian. Like, I'm not a Buddhist pastor, right? So it's like there has, like, but when I look at, like, to your initial question, right? Like, there's certain things that are, like, we meet in a brewery. We don't meet in a place with pews. That's optional. I actually still think, Dustin and I were talking about this beforehand, like, he has a friend that does a church that's all digital. So, like, is the physical space, that's optional. Like, there's certain things. I think community, I think Jesus, I think surrender. I think those things are hard to make not optional. Mm-hmm. But I think everything else is like human construction around it. So when it goes to your friend, I think what she's, or not your friend, but the person on TikTok.
My bestie.
What I think is interesting about her, and I, again, know nothing about her, it seems from your telling of her story, she's trying to make spirituality accessible. Now she maybe like is doing a joke and it could be a whole bit, but I think it's like really like from what you described, if it's not a bit, then it's like this is her thing, trying to be like, hey, I want people to have some level of a spiritual existence, right? And I'm going to try to make it accessible to you. And I think that's real. That should be applauded for what it is. I think I have maybe more non-negotiables, but I appreciate that she's trying to engage people on a spiritual basis.
Yeah, I do feel like I maybe presented it a little bit mockingly, and I actually, when I saw it, the reason why I like wrote it down as something we might talk about on this podcast is because it's compelling. Like, to me, it's compelling to hear these. This is what it felt like. It felt like I'm just gonna say it. It felt like offering a lot of tools, but none of them you had to use.
Love tool analogies.
But it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it was just, she was like, if a shrine helps you, great. If this, and that is so different than from like the Christianity that I walked away from.
I think that's exactly what I was trying to say on the last episode. We
Okay,
just recorded,
interesting.
Was that there's a wider swath of tools available, and they're in front of you. And the question I was trying to ask you, if I didn't articulate it well, and so if you didn't listen to last week, you should go back and listen to it. But was like, what is, because this sounds like you're like, oh, there's so many tools, and I want to explore them. And I guess my question was like, what would prevent you from picking up those tools? And I think this is an interesting thing to be like, there's a lot of these tools in front of you. And like, are you interested then hearing this woman? Like, do you have those tools now? You just articulated that that's dope that there's a lot of tools. Are you interested in using them, or is it cool that there's just tools in front of you?
That's a phenomenal question. Both, but like right now, I don't know, man. Tools were never toys. Like, tools were never low stakes.
Yeah, like
you're
like
building a freaking. But it's like I'm building a freaking dresser. Like, it's not like I'm playing with my play tools on some like 2x4 that someone handed me.
Yeah.
To just like explore. Is that followable?
Yeah, I'll own this as like a buy. Like in the last 2 episodes we've done, like I think the level of baggage you carry with things, I have a hard time resonating with. And so that was a helpful way for you to articulate, because it helps me understand more of where you're, because like I'm like, and I don't really think this, but sometimes like, just get over it. You know what I mean? Like in my mind. And I don't say it to you, but sometimes like and this is me as a human as a whole, like I have a hard time wrestling with empathy. Like when I see people in any place, it's like, and I see the solution, I was like, come on guys. But that's a helpful way to articulate it, because like for you, it wasn't even about the tools you use. It was about the complexity and the importance of the project. Right?
Yeah, and it's like, if crayons were always how you wrote like important work documents, then the coloring feels like stressful.
Right. Yeah, you're not like just coloring family portraits. You're like, this was like my calligraphy pen.
Yeah.
No, so that's helpful for me to hear in the sense of that, because it gives me a better lens to where you're coming from, because it's no like, and this is something that's been interesting. Like your whole journey has been very much like the Shrek onion, right? Like we're peeling back layers to all this, and this is an interesting layer that I had not yet been confronted with in terms of helping me better understand where you're coming from.
Yes, I'm gonna though like play devil's advocate about what I just said though.
Get in there,
because I just finished this beautiful book, called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabriella Zevin.
Okay.
Fantastic. It's about video games. I'm not a video game girl, but like,
what are you gonna get them on Goodreads?
5. No question. Actually, so it's like about these 2 game designers. I'm gonna get to my point, but this is a funny side story. And and they talk a lot about like virtual worlds and just like how that is like a way to escape or heal from the physical world. Like, it's just very deep. It like makes video games deep. Okay. And so I was getting my hair done yesterday, and and I was texting my siblings, and I was like, do we still have our Nintendo DSs? And so my brother drives to the salon. I'm like, foils in hair, right? I come out, get this Nintendo DS, and I'm just like, thank you so much. You don't understand why this matters to me right now. And I played it last night, and it was very, I've never been like into it. I'm not like gonna start, like I'm not like a hardcore gamer now, but it was just like, it's kind of a fun thing. Anyway, one thing that the book says is she's talking about Gen Z, and she says what's so interesting about this group is everything is trauma informed, and everything is like, she was like, they talk all about their traumas, so they never leave their past. And I think, like, I'm not trying to say don't talk about your trauma, like, please don't hear any of that. But what hit me and was maybe a little bit convicting to me is, like, how long are you going to stay there? Like, you can never move past it when you stay there.
Yeah.
So it's, like, in your sense of, like, get over it, it's kind of like, I don't know, like, what do you do to start to get over it? Like, do you just conversion therapy it? Or no, that's not what I'm trying to say. What is a immersion?
You meant that in the best sense of the word. No, yeah.
I feel terrible that I said that. And like, what is it?
EMDR.
Exposure therapy. Like, you know, when someone's like, I'm just going to do it. Like, if you're scared of spiders, you're going to jump into a pit of spiders. Like, like, is that the answer? Because I don't have the capacity for that right now.
Yeah, I don't know that's the answer. But as you were saying that, I just listened to a TikTok actually from like a sports talking head about, he was talking about the Los Angeles Lakers. And he said something like, there's a quote that you're allowed to look at your past, but you shouldn't stare at your past. And he was talking about how the Lakers are like remembering who they were, and they've just like created like every year it's like just crappier versions of who they like. They're getting worse and worse because they remember who they were when they won a championship a few years ago.
Yeah.
But they've like kept the team. They've tried to retool it. And I think that's an interesting thing to what you're saying is like dwelling and staring at it and being like, this is where I was is probably not helpful. Like remembering and recalling and glancing is different than fixating. But I think to your question of like, how do you move? Like, how do you move on?
Because I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's like, even if I'm not staring at it, it still affects me going into the future.
Yeah, I think that's right. Like, but it's the same thing. Like we've used my divorce as an example, right? Like that's, I like, if I fixate on my divorce or stare at my divorce, that's a different thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, and if I recall it, it's different than dwelling on it. And that being a not equally maybe like traumatic, like your religious experience, my divorce, like they've had overlap in the traumatic experience of those. So I don't think that like exposure therapy doesn't work. You tried it. You came to the well.
I mean, I don't know.
You did exposure therapy. You exposed yourself to everything you ever wanted, and it didn't solve the problem. So like, and we've talked about this before. I think there's a deeper rooted issue.
Yeah.
And so I think it's much more than like, I think it's, have you said this? Maybe I just made a TikTok about this. I think it's deeper in your heart is the thing that you need to explore rather than like your hands doing certain things or your mind believing certain things. I think, and so I don't have a great answer for you, but I think like you've explored what does it mean to do faith in my mind? And it left you dissatisfied.
Yeah.
You got to explore what it was like to do faith with your hands, and it left you dissatisfied. I think there's something in your heart that needs to be mind.
Yeah, I think that's wow. I never really thought of the well as exposure therapy because it was like, it's obviously much healthier. Like, I don't think of the well as a pit of spiders. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, but it's like, if you're like, say I've never eaten candy in my life, I'm like, I'm going to throw myself into a patch of Sour Patch Kids, right? Like,
sounds wonderful, but it also will kill you.
Whoa. So it's a great thing. But think about like you went full bore into it, and this is a different, like, just as an, like, you produced great content. People resonated with, like, what you gave out wasn't negative, but what it inputted to you wasn't positive. Like, and you found yourself 2-ish months later, 3, 4, maybe longer than that, somewhere in there. But you were like, this didn't do what I thought. But it was, it's an extreme statement to call it exposure therapy. But you were like,
saying.
You were texting me about doing kids ministry. You were preaching.
Yeah.
You were on a team I was trying to form for sermons. Like, you were as invested as one could have been.
Yeah.
So you were as exposed as you could have been. And so I think that's proof that if I was advocating for you or for anyone that's watching or listening, don't do exposure. I don't think that's the right answer.
Yeah, because it's interesting because last episode you were like, I don't get why you threw the baby out with the bathwater. But it's like if you ate a bunch of Sour Patch Kids and then you threw up and then you were like, well, F Sour Patch Kids forever.
Yeah.
And you're like, Sour Patch Kids were never the issue.
Yeah, it was that you ate 900 of them in 20 minutes.
Truly.
Yeah.
But it's like that. I mean, but again, like, it doesn't, you still taste the bile when you eat a Sour Patch Kid, to be graphic.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting to process too, is like, whatever, there are no other places in my life where I take analogies so far. It's really fun. But like when you eat something, consume something, like that you still have that like reaction, the physical, you've talked about your body a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how does my body feel? How does my body respond to this? And like you have a visceral reaction to church. You have a visceral reaction to binging Sour Patch Kids.
Indeed.
So I think that's an interesting thing to think about. It's like you can't disconnect the feeling that comes from the old experiences you had. But I think there's also some level of like rewriting those neural pathways to like create healthier experiences as well. But
Yeah. Huh. I think that's really like a very interesting analogy that really hits home. Because it's like, I don't half-ass anything in my life. You know what I'm saying?
I agree with
like,
that. For you.
If it like that, then you get, it's like, I don't know. That's just like how I live my life until you can get burnt out from things so easily and go to other extremes.
Yeah. Were there other things in your life that you had not half-assed but had fizzled out on before church, like before Presbyterianism?
I mean, that was like the biggest one.
I guess my underlying, do you think that's like a habitual thing for you, or do you think it's like...
Well, none of them held as much emotion and as much like lens weight.
Sure.
Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, that was your worldview.
That was like the huge one. So I'm thinking of like smaller examples. For sure, there have been times where, like, I've done something too much and then it just like I got sick of it. Like, I'll say like stand-up comedy. Like, I still do comedy, but like in the summer I was at Mike's every night, like never stopping.
Yeah.
And there was a time where I was like, oh my God, like, and like I was treating it like a job and I was like, this isn't a job. Like, you know, like you have to.
But you also have other things in your life too, like
100%.
that have like filled some of those spaces.
Absolutely. But the point being, like, you learn as you just like feel like, I don't know, you can't do all of everything forever, and otherwise you'll die.
That's right.
If you take anything out of today's episode,
you die. So more specifically, then, how many more episodes do you think you have in you before you quit this?
I don't think I really full-assed this podcast.
I think you do.
I mean, not that I don't care, but I don't.
So this is the recipe for success. Like, have you kind of like dip a toe in, and you've got longevity. I think that's great.
But it's like I don't have a lot of other responsibilities on this podcast other than showing up.
Yeah, you show up and talk for a couple hours.
Yeah,
and then
that is not, to me, that's not full-assing it.
Somehow it ends up on all these other places.
It's just like, that is me.
That's funny. That's funny. Well, I think you're doing great. I think you,
thank you.
As Ron Swanson would say, you're whole ass in it. Isn't that a Ron Swanson quote?
Yeah, don't half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing. I follow that with my life.
I was just talking with someone at Ron Swanson. He's one of the funniest characters in the sense that he's nothing like real Nick Offerman, but now everyone thinks that's who he is.
Uh-huh.
Like, no, I can't think of another character where people are like, this is who you are. And he's like nothing like that guy. You
don't think Michael Scott's like that?
I don't think Steve Carell's like Michael Scott.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't think that is. I think Michael Scott's way more. He's more Bruce Almighty. Evan Almighty. I don't. Embrace the journey. No,
but I'm saying that they're not like each other, and you were saying Nick Offerman and Ron Swanson are not like each other.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was saying that's another example.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you.
Okay. No problem. Steve Carell has a incredible range. Can we just like talk about that? We don't have to get into that. But I'm just saying, I just watched
in real life. Like, come on.
I haven't seen that.
I mean.
The Patient. Did you watch that on Hulu?
Oh yeah, it wrecked me. The end of it was one of the worst feelings I've had. It was like watching them. Have you ever seen Seven?
No.
It was It felt like that movie at the ending where I was like, oh, okay, so I'm just gonna like cry now and like just not be happy.
But I'm not. Skip, like, hit the like 15-second skip if you don't want to hear what happened. I'm not going to spoil it.
1 minute. Hit it a couple times.
I'm not going to spoil it. But I loved the Sam character.
Is that the guy, the kidnapper?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was really good. I loved the show. I thought
like,
it was
but
great.
I felt a lot of pity for him and everyone else.
Yeah,
I am gonna curse real quick. Our mutual friend Aaron, we were watching it together, and I was like, I kind of feel bad for him, and he just goes, "That's because you're a angel." He was just like perfect.
That's really funny.
And I was like, I just think he's trying to be better.
That's why it was an interesting. I empathized.
Yeah.
I felt bad for him. the show ends. I was like, man. So that's a different. Like, I hated it, but I loved it. I thought it was one of the greatest.
Yeah.
Like, I just didn't like the idea of how it ended. I was really bummed. I need happy endings, and my body doesn't do well when I see things end in tragedy and sadness.
Yeah, but also it would have been too clean if it.
Would have been too clean. But that's why I like The Last of Us right now. The Last of Us is
Everyone
wrecking my
talking
mind
about
right
that.
now.
I need to watch it. Okay.
Should we start another podcast where we just talk about TV shows?
I would love that. Actually, the Dirty Rotten Church Kids podcast that we had as a guest, we had Adrian on. They and all their episodes end with "Sip, Smoke, Read," which is like they just say what things they're enjoying, which is nice.
We should add that sometime.
We should add that. Not to take it away from them, but we should call it the same thing and everything. Yeah. Anyway, how did we get here? Steve Carell, Nick Offerman, half-assing, whole-assing. I got there.
We've come a long way.
I feel like we should put on the blurb like you can just end it after like maybe Dustin can come on and be like, hey everybody, the episode's basically over right now.
Just so you know, we'll put in the show notes. Episode ends at 17:55. I think so not everyone watches in the same or listens in the same way that we record them, right? We do 2 episode chunks, right?
Yeah.
Usually. I've enjoyed these 2.
Me too.
In the sense that I feel like I've gotten to know you better. Which I always appreciate getting. Like, we've been friends now for almost a whole full year.
More than a year. I met you in January.
More than a year.
Yeah.
I thought I met you closer to Easter, I guess no. So you're right.
Yeah, I was like, why do you think I've only been to your church for 2 months?
You came for a while. So I'm getting to know you better. Yeah. I always appreciate getting to know you better. But also I feel like you have hit interesting pressure points in me, like the things to think about. I feel like I've been able to push into some of those on you, and I've found that to be really interesting, just to like think through that for both of us. And so I've enjoyed these.
Me too.
45 minutes that we've just spent together.
Yeah, I have too. They kind of overlap. So I'd say, I mean, you're at the end of episode 38, but if you didn't watch them in order, you should.
Yeah, we'll part 1 and part 2 maybe.
Maybe.
So
or not.
We'll call this episode The Patient.
I want 37 to be called Why Am I So Sad? Because I just think that's a funny title.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right, Emily, send us off.
Everybody, thanks for listening, and embrace the journey. And watch The Patient on Hulu.
We're not paid for that.